Christmas night smells of roasted rosemary chicken and buttered rolls. The kind of aroma that usually drifts through these walls like a memory of all the years I tried to make holidays feel whole. My hands still ache from kneading dough this morning, the veins more visible now, but I insisted on cooking because this villa has always been mine to open. It was the one promise I kept to myself after my husband died, that no matter how fractured we became, this house would hold us together. The dining room glows with the soft light of the chandelier we saved months to buy back in the 80s. I polish each wine glass with the corner of a dish towel, the way he used to, twisting gently at the base. For a moment, I almost hear his whistle from the kitchen, that tune he carried like a secret language only I knew. The doorbell rings, my chest lifts. Family, my son, his wife, maybe even neighbors stopping by with pies. I hurry to the entryway, smoothing the front of my dress. But when the door opens, I hear my daughter-in-law's voice, bright-clipped, rehearsed. "Remember," she says over her shoulder to the group trailing behind her family, "only tonight." Her words hit me before her eyes do. Family only. She doesn't look at me when she says it. She says it like a command, a rule already written somewhere above my head. Behind her, people I don't recognize carry gift bags wrapped in metallic paper, their laughter spilling into my hallway like spilled wine. I stand frozen at the threshold, my hand still on the doorknob. Oh, I manage because my throat has tightened into something small. I thought it was just us. Her smile appears polished, perfectly white, the kind that never touches her eyes. "Of course, Mom," she says, voice sticky sweet. "Your family, why don't you rest in the den? We'll take care of everything." The words sound kind, but they press me backward gently but firmly out of my own dining room. I move as if on command, my slippers brushing against the marble I picked with my husband, when this house was nothing but echoes and empty rooms. The laughter grows behind me, chairs scraping silverware, clinking against china. I pause at the den doorway. The fire crackles, but the room feels colder than outside air. I lower myself into the armchair, the one with a dent shaped like my husband's shoulder. I listen. Every sound of my villa is filled with strangers' voices, every plate I set out now claimed by someone else. I remember the way my son once pulled a stool across this very kitchen floor just to help me stir cookie dough. His hands were so small, covered in flour. "We're a team, Mom," he said then. Those words belonged here. But tonight his laughter mixes with hers, light and easy, like I'm not even in the house. A part of me wants to walk back in, slam the dishes down, demand space at the table I built. But another part, older, wearier, just folds into the chair. My hands rest on my lap, nails chipped from days of cleaning, and I feel invisible, erased, in my own home. Through the vent above me, voices drift down. Someone compliments the beautiful villa. My daughter-in-law answers quickly, proudly. "Oh, yes, it'll be ours soon enough." I stop breathing for a moment. My palms press hard into my knees. The house tilts around me, the chandelier light flickering through the doorway like a star burning out. Ours soon enough. She says it with the certainty of someone already decorating the walls in her mind, already carving my name out of the deed. I press my lips together, forcing the ache down, swallowing the sound of my own disbelief. The villa smells like rosemary and butter, but all I can taste is metal, sharp, bitter, final. I sit there for hours, fire turning to ash, the voices fading one by one until doors slam and engines start. The house goes silent again, but it's not my silence anymore. It belongs to them, their echoes staining every wall. I lean back in the armchair, staring at the ceiling vent. The air hums. I whisper to myself, barely audible, "family only." The words coil like smoke, impossible to hold, impossible to forget. That night, I don't sleep in my bed. I stay curled in the den, wrapped in a blanket that doesn't feel warm. My villa, once a sanctuary, feels like a stage I've been pushed off of. And somewhere deep inside, a truth begins to form heavier than grief. They don't see me as family anymore. When I close my eyes after that Christmas, I drift backward as though the only way to make sense of being erased is to remember when I mattered most. The villa wasn't always marble floors and chandeliers. It was dirt under my nails, a second mortgage that kept me awake, and a husband who swore we could build something out of almost nothing. I was 30 when we bought this place. Back then, the walls were bare drywall. The kitchen, a skeleton of pipes and wires. The yard, nothing more than patches of mud. My husband worked overtime at the factory, and I picked up shifts at the diner, carrying trays heavier than I should have, smiling until my cheeks ached. Every dollar felt like a brick in the foundation. There were nights we ate soup from the same pot 3 days in a row, laughing that we'd call it family stew. My son was little then, barely 5, his hair sticking up no matter how much I brushed it. He used to sleep on a mattress on the floor, pointing to the ceiling beams. One day, "Mom," he said, "this will be a castle." I believed him. Children's hope has a way of stitching courage into your bones. I gave up graduate school for this house. I had been accepted into a teaching program, a chance to step out of waitressing, but tuition was too much, and the villa needed us. I told myself I'd study later once things settled. Things never settled. I folded my acceptance letter into a shoebox in the closet and poured my energy into raising a son and making this place worthy of him. Every tile in the entryway, every coat of paint in the bedrooms carries my fingerprints. When the plumber overcharged us, I learned how to fix pipes myself, crouched on the floor with a wrench bigger than my forearm. My hands bled, but I never complained. I wanted my son to see stability, not struggle. The villa became the center of our lives. Birthdays with balloons taped to the ceiling. High school graduation banners draped across the banister. My husband's 50th, with a chocolate cake so lopsided, we all laughed until our ribs ached. It wasn't just a house. It was the history of us. And when my husband got sick, it became his sanctuary. The den where I sat on Christmas was where I held his hand through chemo nights. He asked me once, his voice trembling, "Promise me this place stays with you. Don't let anyone push you out." I kissed his palm and whispered yes, because there was no one else I trusted with the weight of his words. After he passed, my son stepped into manhood too fast. He started working, building a life of his own. And I was proud, though loneliness clung to me like a shadow. When he married, I tried to welcome her, my daughter-in-law, with all the grace I could muster. I set the table for her favorites, learned her preferences, smiled when she rearranged the furniture. I told myself she was family now, and family meant bending, not breaking. But even then, small cracks appeared. Little comments at the dinner table like, "These old curtains make the room feel dated," or, "Wouldn't it be nice if the villa had a more modern owner's touch?" I laughed them off, telling myself she was just young with different tastes. But I felt something sharp sliding under the skin. Still, I carried on. When they struggled with bills, I covered a month's rent for them. When they had their first child, I stayed up nights to rock the baby so they could sleep. I gave without being asked, without keeping tally. Isn't that what mothers do? Isn't that what family means? Sometimes, late at night, I'd walk the villa's halls barefoot, listening to the creaks that had become a kind of music to me. I'd touch the wallpaper in the upstairs corridor, the one with tiny roses printed in neat rows. My husband and I hung it together, paste dripping down our arms, laughing until we nearly ruined the pattern. Even now, The wallpaper holds a faint trace of his cologne cedar and tobacco. I breathe it in like a prayer. I thought all those years of sacrifice, of turning myself into the spine of this family, meant I had a place at the table forever. I believed love was earned through service, through showing up, through standing last in line, but never leaving the line. And maybe that was my mistake. Maybe love to them was just convenience. The villa wasn't a castle anymore. It was a prize. My history had been paved over with their ambitions. The night after Christmas, I sat with a box of old photographs spread across the floor. My son's toothless grin, his first bike in the driveway, my husband holding a hammer above his head in triumph. Each photo was proof that I had given everything I had to make this place not just a house, but a heartbeat. Yet here I was, tucked into corners, told to rest, while strangers laughed in my dining room. My sacrifices weren't invisible. I could see them in every beam, every brick. But they had become invisible to the very people I built this life for. The wallpaper smelled like him still. I pressed my forehead against it and closed my eyes. In that moment, I realized the villa held me, but they did not. The first time I noticed something shift between us, it was so subtle. I almost convinced myself it didn't happen. It was Thanksgiving years ago, when she had just married my son. I had set the table with the same pumpkin orange runner I'd used since he was a boy. I thought she'd smile at the tradition, maybe even ask me about the recipe for the cornbread stuffing. Instead, she smoothed her napkin, glanced at the runner, and said with a laugh, "You know, in my family, we do things a little more modern." The word stung, though she said it lightly, like it was a compliment hidden in criticism. My son chuckled and kissed her temple, telling me not to worry. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down, I knew modern was her polite way of saying better. From then on, there were more of those comments. When I brought out the china my husband and I had bought second-hand years ago, she tilted her head and said, "It's sweet, Mom, really. But maybe one day we'll upgrade you." Upgrade me, as if I were a broken appliance. At first I laughed along because I wanted so badly to keep peace. I had heard enough horror stories of mothers-in-law being painted as bitter, controlling, impossible. I didn't want to be that woman. So I swallowed my hurt and told myself she was just young, just different, just trying to find her place. But she didn't want to find a place. She wanted to take one. One afternoon, not long after their wedding, she came into the villa carrying a glossy magazine. She spread it on the dining table and flipped through photos of gleaming kitchens with white marble islands, open-plan living rooms, minimalist designs. She tapped one page with her manicured nail. "This is what a house should look like. Don't you think?" I looked around at my own kitchen oak cabinets my husband had stained with his own hands, counters chipped from years of chopping vegetables, a fridge covered in magnets from every state we'd driven through. To me, it was beautiful. To her, it was outdated. "I think homes should tell a story," I said carefully. She smiled that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Stories are fine, but value is better." That word value echoed in my chest. I thought she meant resale, but part of me already sensed it. She didn't see this villa as a story, as a life. She saw it as currency. I started noticing her small invasions. She'd shift my framed photos so hers were front and center. She'd correct the way I folded laundry, insisting, "It's easier if you do it my way." She'd host friends here without asking, her voice ringing through the halls as if she owned them already. When I spoke up even gently, she brushed me off. "You worry too much. We're all family here." But I didn't feel like family. I felt like a guest overstaying my welcome in my own house. Once during my granddaughter's birthday, she ordered a custom cake shaped like a princess castle. I offered to bake my old chocolate sheet cake, the one my son had grown up with, decorated with sprinkles we used to shake out of a plastic tube. She laughed softly, almost pitying. That's cute, but she deserves something special. That word deserves landed like a stone in my stomach. Did my son not deserve the cake I'd baked all those years? Did my sacrifices, my long nights of work and worry, not count as special? I smiled anyway, cutting small squares of sheet cake for myself and the few neighbors who still remembered the old traditions. I told myself not to make waves, but every smile felt heavier than the last, as if each one pulled another piece of me down. The worst moments weren't the comments, they were the silences. I would enter a room, and conversations would pause. Plans would already be made without me photographs taken, without me decisions finalized before I even knew there was a choice. It was like being erased in pencil strokes, quiet, almost invisible, but permanent all the same. My son tried to bridge the gap at first. He'd call me after work, asking if I needed groceries, if I wanted to join them for dinner. But slowly, his calls grew less frequent. "We've been busy," he'd say. "You know how it is." I did know. I knew she was pulling him into her orbit, and the more he spun around her, the less he looked back at me. I told myself it was natural that sons grow, that wives become the center. I tried to swallow the loneliness, but it tasted bitter every time. One evening after helping them with babysitting, I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen. She was laughing, voice low but sharp. "I told him your mom's ideas are sweet, but she needs to let go. It's our turn now. Our turn." The words sank into me like ice water. I realized then that she didn't see me as part of their future. She saw me as the past, something to be managed, tolerated, then cleared away. Still, I said nothing. I smiled through holidays, through birthdays, through casual dinners where I was offered the least comfortable chair. I convinced myself silence was survival. If I stayed quiet, maybe they'd still keep me close. But silence doesn't keep you close. It only teaches them how far they can push you away. The villa that once felt like a fortress began to feel like a cage. The walls still carried the laughter of my son's childhood, but now they also carried whispers of dismissal, the sound of a future where I no longer belonged. I wanted to believe love was enough, but with every polished smile, every upgrade suggestion, every little exclusion, I started to see the truth. Love to her was transactional, and my balance was running out. After Christmas, the villa carried a different kind of silence. Not the comforting quiet of early mornings when sunlight slipped through the curtains, but a hollow hush like the sound of a house holding its breath. I moved through the room slowly, as if afraid of waking something I no longer recognized. The dining table still held faint rings from glasses, and when I wiped them, I thought about how none of those glasses had been raised to me. Strangers had toasted in my dining room while I sat alone in the den. My own house had turned against me, its warmth given to others, while I was tucked away like a fragile ornament too delicate to display. At first, I told myself it was just a holiday slip, that my son and his wife hadn't meant harm. But then, the invitations stopped coming. Sunday brunches that once filled this place with chatter were suddenly relocated to their home across town. My phone stayed still on the counter screen, black no messages. When I called, my daughter-in-law answered with a cheerful, "We've just been so busy. Always busy. Too busy for me." I walked into the living room one evening and noticed a new family portrait on the mantel. My son, my granddaughter, my daughter-in-law, all smiling in coordinated blue outfits. My chest warmed for a moment until I realized the space where I once stood was gone. No group photo including me. Just them, as if I had never existed. I reached for the frame, my fingers trembling. The glass was cool, the smiles beneath it warmer than anything I had felt in months. I placed it back carefully, as if it might shatter, though I was the one already breaking. Silence became my companion. I ate dinners alone, reheating leftovers and setting a single plate at the corner of the long table. The chair across from me stayed empty, a constant reminder of what used to be. Even the clock on the wall ticked louder each second, like a drip of water against stone. When I visited their home one weekend, I noticed my granddaughter's drawings taped to the refrigerator stick figures of her and her parents. No grandmother. I asked gently if she wanted to draw me too. My daughter-in-law cut in quickly, smiling. She just draws what she sees most. The words carried the sharpness of truth. Out of sight, out of memory. At night, I wandered the villa's halls barefoot, my steps echoing in a way they hadn't before. The rooms were full, but felt empty. The laughter of the past clashed with the silence of the present, and the dissonance pressed down on me until my chest ached. Sometimes I'd sit in the den with the lights off, listening through the vent for echoes that weren't there. I thought of my husband, how he used to say, "This villa was our anchor." But anchors can also drag you down, can't they? One evening while folding laundry, I found a shirt of my son's he had left years ago, soft and faded. I pressed it to my face, inhaling the faint scent of detergent long gone. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I realized I was crying. It wasn't the loss of the shirt that hurt. It was the loss of the boy who once hugged me goodnight, who once promised we were a team. The worst part was how gradual it all was. Erasure didn't come like a storm. It seeped in like water through cracks in the foundation. One missed call, one family photo without me, one holiday too busy to include me. By the time I realized I was outside, looking in the door had already closed. I began to see it in smaller ways too. When they visited the villa, she moved through it with the ease of ownership, adjusting curtains, rearranging pillows, placing her hand on the banister, as if testing its sturdiness. My son followed her lead without noticing. To him, it was natural. To me, it was invasion disguised as routine. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to a friend on the phone while standing near the patio. Her voice carried through the sliding glass doors. "It's such a gorgeous place. Honestly, once it's ours, I'll remodel everything." "She's sweet, but it's time for an update. Once it's ours." I stood frozen, the dish towel in my hand, dripping water onto the floor. My heart thudded against my ribs, each beat a reminder that I was still here, even if she was already erasing me in her mind. That night, I sat at the dining table with a cold plate of chicken in front of me. I didn't eat. I just stared at the walls, at the wallpaper we had hung decades ago, at the chandelier glowing faintly above me. For the first time, the villa didn't feel like mine. It felt borrowed, as if I were a tenant in a house I had built brick by brick. I pressed my palms flat against the table. The wood was solid, but my grip felt weak. I whispered to myself, "I am still here." The words sounded strange in the emptiness, almost like a prayer. But even as I spoke them, I felt the truth settling in. Presence isn't the same as belonging. And in the quiet of my villa, I realized I had both and neither. It was a Tuesday afternoon when she showed up with papers. No warning, no phone call, just the sound of her knock-sharp businesslike, followed by the sweep of her perfume as she stepped into my foyer. She carried a folder in one hand, balanced against her hip, the way a lawyer might hold case files. "Mom," she said brightly, her voice too sweet for the seriousness of her eyes. "I brought something simple for you to sign. Just paperwork to make sure things are smooth later." The word later slid across my skin like ice. I gestured toward the dining table, my heart already heavy. She placed the folder down and flipped it open with practiced ease. I saw pages thick with legal text blocks of paragraphs, signature lines waiting like open mouths. "It's just a transfer document," she explained casually, as if we were talking about a recipe. The villa will pass to us anyway one day, but this way there won't be any complications. You'll still live here, of course. Nothing changes except security for the future. Her tone was rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. I lowered myself into the chair across from her, my hands resting on the table. My nails tapped lightly against the wood, an unconscious rhythm betraying my unease. "You want me to give you the house?" I said quietly. She laughed, dismissing the weight of my words with a flick of her hand. "Not give Mom. Transfer. Think of it as planning. Everyone does this. You don't want probate court to drag your son through years of paperwork, do you, probate?" She knew the language too well. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea. She had studied this, researched it, maybe even had help drafting the forms. My chest tightened. I looked at her carefully groomed face, at the way her lips curved, but her eyes stayed cold. She wasn't asking. She was expecting. I reached out and touched the edge of the paper just to feel its weight. It was heavier than it looked, a whole future folded into black ink. My husband's laughter, my son's childhood, my sacrifices, the late nights with sore hands and empty pockets, all condensed into legal jargon that would erase me with a single signature. "Why now?" I asked. She tilted her head, smiling like a teacher explaining something obvious. "Because it's time. You've held on long enough, Mom. Let us take responsibility. You'll be free of the stress, and the house will finally be in the right hands." The right hands? I felt my throat tighten, the air around me heavy as stone. For a moment, I thought of my son, the little boy, who once pressed flour-dusted fingers into mine and promised we were a team. I wanted to believe he didn't know that this wasn't his doing, but in my heart, I feared he did. I pushed the papers gently back toward her. My hand trembled, but my voice came steady. "I'm not signing." She blinked, surprise flickering before her expression reset into calm composure. "Don't be stubborn, Mom. It's just a formality. Everyone will be happier once it's done." I shook my head slowly. "Not me." The smile slipped just slightly, but enough for me to see the steel beneath. She tapped the pen against the table, rhythmic sharp. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Not a request, a warning. The villa around us felt different in that moment. The chandelier's glow seemed dimmer, the wallpaper's roses duller. This wasn't my sanctuary anymore. It was her battleground, and I was standing in the way. I gathered the papers into a neat stack and slid them back into her folder. "No," I repeated, quieter this time, but firmer. "I'm not signing anything today. Or ever." Her eyes narrowed, her smile fading completely now. She stood abruptly, snapping the folder shut. "You'll regret this, Mom. You're making things complicated for everyone." She left without another word, her heels clicking sharply across the marble floor. The sound echoed long after the door slammed shut. I stayed seated at the table, staring at the spot where the papers had been. My palms were damp, my breath uneven. For the first time, I realized just how vulnerable I was, not just to exclusion, but to legal erasure. I picked up the pen she had left behind, still lying there, gleaming silver under the light. My hand hovered above the table, as though I might sign after all. But instead, I set it down carefully, almost tenderly, as if rejecting the weight it carried. I pressed my forehead against the cool surface of the table. My heart thudded in my chest, not with rage, but with a quiet, heavy sorrow. She didn't just want my house. She wanted to erase me, reduce me to a name crossed out on a deed, a ghost lingering in hallways where strangers laughed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the villa, touching walls, doors, furniture, the life I had built. Every corner whispered of my husband, my son, the sacrifices that shaped this place into more than property. It was legacy, memory, identity, and she wanted it on paper, tied up in ink. I ended the night in the den, curled into my husband's old armchair, staring at the empty fireplace. The silence pressed in around me heavier than flames ever could. Her pen had waited, but my hand had stayed still. It happened on an ordinary Saturday evening, the kind of night when the villa should have felt safe. I had cooked a small meal for myself, just soup and bread, nothing fancy, and left the dishes soaking in the sink. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the furnace. I sat in the den with a book open, but unread in my lap. My thoughts kept circling the folder she had placed on the table weeks earlier, the way her voice had sharpened when I refused. That's when I heard the front door open. My son's laugh drifted through the hallway, warm and familiar, followed by her sharper tone. They hadn't told me they were stopping by. I froze, wondering if I should step out to greet them, but something in the cadence of their voices, low conspiratorial, kept me rooted in the chair. I heard their footsteps move into the kitchen. The vent above the den carried sound like a funnel, every word sliding down into my ears whether I wanted it or not. "She won't sign, my son," said his voice tinged with frustration. A pause. Then her reply smooth as silk. "Of course she won't, not right away. She thinks this place is her identity, but give it time. She's older, she'll tire. People like her always do." My breath caught. People like her. Not mother, not family, just an obstacle, a category. "She can't live here forever," my son added, sighing. "It's too much house for one person." "That's the point," she said quickly. "It's wasted like this. Once it's ours, we can remodel, make it valuable again. We'll finally have a place that reflects us." Her voice rose slightly with excitement. "And think about the equity we could refinance, pay off the cars, maybe even get that vacation house you wanted." Equity, vacation house. My villa, my husband's sweat, my sacrifices, it had been reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet and dreams of luxury. I felt something inside me split, sharp as glass. My son, my only child, the boy who once promised we were a team, was standing in my kitchen, plotting the disposal of my life's work, as if I were already gone. For a moment, I wanted to storm in, confront them, demand answers. But my body wouldn't move. My palms pressed into the fabric of the armchair, nails digging deep. If I entered that kitchen, I feared I'd hear them confirm what I already knew: I didn't belong. Her laughter floated down through the vent. "Don't worry, he'll cave. They always do when we keep the pressure steady. She can't outlast us." Outlast. As if it were a war. I swallowed hard tears, burning my eyes. I had thought the exclusion, the papers, the dismissive comments were insults enough. But this, hearing my own son conspire against me, hearing his silence as she spoke of me, like an obstacle to be removed, was the true betrayal. They left after half an hour, their voices fading, the door shutting softly behind them. I sat in the den long after, staring at the vent, as if it might still speak. The house creaked in the settling cold, every sound echoing with new meaning. This villa was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battlefield, and I was the enemy. That night, I couldn't eat. I walked from room to room, touching furniture, walls, photographs, as though grounding myself against the possibility that I might be erased. My husband's voice echoed faintly in memory. "Promise me, this place stays with you." I whispered into the emptiness. I promised. "I won't let them take it." But I didn't yet know how. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching on the dust that floated in the air. I boiled water for tea, hands trembling as I held the kettle. I couldn't unhear their words, and for the first time, fear mixed with something else, clarity. I realized silence was no longer safety. My quiet compliance, my attempts to keep peace had only taught them how far they could go. If I didn't act, they would keep pushing until the deed no longer carried my name. I pulled out a notepad from the drawer and scribbled down words I had never thought I'd need: trust, elder law attorney, estate protection. The letters looked foreign under my pen, but they steadied me. I knew I had to find help beyond myself. The villa was mine, yes, but ownership meant nothing if ignorance left me vulnerable. They had knowledge on their side. I needed it too. I poured the tea and sat at the table staring at the rising steam. The betrayal had cut deep, but beneath it, something unexpected flickered resolve. That night, before I went to bed, I paused in the hallway. The wallpaper still carried the faint scent of my husband's cologne. I pressed my palm against it, whispering again, I promised. And this time, my voice didn't break. The fire in the den stayed dark, but in my chest, a new flame had caught. The Monday after I overheard them, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold. The villa was silent, but it didn't comfort me anymore. It pressed in like the walls themselves were waiting to see what I would do. My son's voice still echoed through the vent. She can't live here forever. For the first time in years, I opened my laptop and searched for words I never thought would apply to me: elder financial abuse, estate protection, exploitation of seniors. The screen filled with articles, legal terms, stories of people like me who had been convinced or coerced into signing away home savings, everything they had built. I read until my chest felt hollow. One article caught my eye: National Adult Protective Services. Know the red flags. I clicked. There it was, in black and white pressure to sign documents: isolation from family, entitlement to property. Each point matched what had been happening in my life, like a checklist written for me. I sat back, the chair creaking under my weight. My palms were damp against the keyboard. Recognition hurt, but it also sharpened me. If this had happened to others, then there must be ways to fight it. The next day, I walked into the community center downtown. A flyer on the bulletin board had advertised a free legal aid workshop for seniors. I almost turned around at the door. What if I looked foolish? What if I didn't belong? But then, I thought of her manicured nails tapping the pen against my dining table, her smile when she said, "It's time." I pushed myself forward. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. About a dozen people sat in folding chairs, most older than me, some with notebooks, some with tired eyes like mine. At the front, a woman in a gray blazer introduced herself as a volunteer attorney. Her voice was steady, not unkind. Financial exploitation is one of the fastest growing forms of elder abuse, she began. Often it comes not from strangers, but from family. Today we'll talk about tools you can use to protect yourself: irrevocable trusts, powers of attorney, living wills. Each word felt like a stone placed in my hands. Heavy, yes, but also real, tangible. Protection wasn't just a wish, it was paperwork, signatures, legal armor. When the session ended, I lingered, clutching a pamphlet she had passed out. On the cover, "Protect What's Yours." I approached her slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can I ask, if someone is pressuring me to sign over my home, what can I do?" She looked at me directly, her eyes steady. "First, don't sign. Second, you can place the property in a trust of your choosing. It locks it away from coercion. You decide who inherits, not whoever pressures you in the moment." I nodded, throat tight. Even if it's my family, especially if it's your family, she said gently. I walked out into the cold air, the pamphlet tucked under my arm like a shield. The winter wind bit at my cheeks, but for the first time in months, I felt the smallest flicker of control. At home, I spread the pamphlet across the kitchen table where her folder had once sat. Side by side, the contrast was stark, her papers demanding my signature, and these papers offering me protection. I traced the bold print with my finger. You are not powerless. That night, I sat in the den with the pamphlet open on my lap. My husband's photo watched me from the mantel, his eyes caught in mid-laughter. I whispered to him, I think I found a way. The words steadied me as though saying them aloud turned fear into promise. The following week, I scheduled a consultation with an estate attorney. The office was small but tidy, with shelves of thick legal books that smelled faintly of dust. The attorney, a woman with kind eyes and a firm voice, listened as I explained. My daughter-in-law brought me papers, I said quietly. She wants me to sign the villa over. I said no. Then I overheard them talking, planning, as if I'm already gone. The attorney didn't flinch. You're not the first to walk through this door with that story, she said. And you won't be the last. What matters is that you're here before anything's been signed. She explained irrevocable trusts, how they could secure the property's future beyond manipulation. She showed me examples of protective clauses, ways to name beneficiaries who truly mattered. Every word felt like a stone being laid into a new foundation, one that could hold against the storm. When she slid a blank draft across the desk, my hands trembled. Not with fear this time, but with something close to relief. I didn't have to wait for them to take my future. I could place it out of reach myself. Back at the villa, I sat at the dining table again this time, with the legal draft in front of me. The chandelier light gleamed off the pages. I read each line, slowly savoring the weight of choice returning to me. The villa wouldn't be stolen. It would be protected, carried forward in a way that honored what my husband and I built. I thought of my granddaughter, her crayons scattered across the marble floor, her laughter still innocent. I smiled softly. Maybe one day the villa would be hers. Not because it was taken, but because it was given with love. I closed the folder and placed it carefully on the table. It felt heavier than her documents ever had, but in a different way, solid, secure, like armor fitted to my bones. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. The house creaked and sighed, but I didn't hear betrayal in its walls. I heard resolve. The pamphlet still sat beside my bed, its corners bent from my hands. Every time I looked at it, the bold words reminded me I was not powerless. The next battle would come, I knew. She would return, maybe with sharper words, maybe with more pressure. But this time, I wouldn't face her empty-handed. This time, I had more than silence. I had a plan. The morning I filed the trust, the sky was gray heavy with winter clouds that pressed low over the city. I wore my husband's old wool coat, the one with the missing button near the collar, because I needed something of him around me. Walking into the attorney's office, I felt small, like a child clutching papers too important for her hands. The receptionist smiled gently, ushering me into a conference room with polished wooden walls and a single window that looked out onto bare trees. The attorney greeted me, her voice steady. She laid the draft trust on the table as though it were a shield being passed from one soldier to another. "Are you ready?" she asked. I swallowed hard and nodded. My hand shook slightly as I picked up the pen. I remembered the way my daughter-in-law had tapped her own pen against my dining table, expectant. That day, I had refused. Today, I was saying yes to myself. Each signature line, was a small act of defiance ink, sealing the cracks where silence once lived. By the time I set the pen down, my heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something else, something like victory. The attorney slid the document into a stamped envelope. This will be filed with the county today. Once it's recorded, it cannot be undone. The villa is protected. Protected. The word wrapped around me like a blanket. As I walked back to my car, snow began to fall, soft flakes dissolving against the windshield. I sat for a long time before starting the engine, watching the world blur into white. My husband's voice echoed in memory. Promise me, this place stays with you. For the first time, I believed I had truly kept that promise. Back home, the villa felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but anchored. Its walls no longer whispered of loss. They carried the quiet strength of a decision finally made. And then, later that night, I opened the stamped copy of the trust again at the dining table, just to be sure it was real. What I read next was worse than silence, cold stamped proof that everything had changed. Excerpt: Irrevocable Trust Filing. Trust Agreement. This document certifies the establishment of an irrevocable living trust by Margaret Elaine Porter, hereinafter grantor, dated January 12, 2022. Article 1. Declaration of Trust. The grantor hereby transfers full legal ownership of the property located at 418 Willow Creek Drive, the villa, into the trust to be administered under the following terms. Article 2. Beneficiary Designation. The sole beneficiary of this trust shall be Emily Porter, granddaughter of the grantor, to inherit upon the grantor's death. Article 3. Restrictions. This trust is irrevocable and may not be altered, revoked, or contested by any third party, including family members by marriage or bloodline. Article 4. Trustee Appointment. The grantor hereby appoints Lawrence and Bell, P.C., as trustee to administer the property with fiduciary responsibility and ensure compliance with this agreement. Certification signed, sealed, and filed with the county clerk, January 12, 2022. Stamp received. Official record. When I finished reading, my eyes blurred with tears. Not from grief this time, but from relief. The coldness of the legal text, its blunt formality, was also its gift. No more room for persuasion, no more pen poised above my dining table. The villa was no longer up for debate. I pressed the stamped copy to my chest, leaning back in the chair. For months, I had felt invisible. Now on paper, my choice was permanent, undeniable. Of course, I knew this would not end the conflict. When she discovered what I had done, she would rage. She would smile less politely, press harder, maybe even turn my son against me more than before. But I also knew something else she couldn't touch, what was now sealed beyond her reach. The villa was mine to live in, and Emily's to inherit. It was out of their hands. That night, as snow thickened outside, I lit the fireplace in the den for the first time in months. I curled into my husband's old armchair and let the flames crackle against the silence. The villa didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like a fortress, and I was no longer its prisoner, I was its guardian. She came back on a Sunday afternoon unannounced, as usual. I had been kneeling in the garden, brushing dead leaves from the frozen soil, when I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. My son's SUV. My heart tightened, but it was her heels I heard first, clicking against the stone path. "Mom," she called, voice sugar sweet. "We need to talk." I wiped my hands on my coat and followed her inside. She moved quickly straight to the dining table, as if it were hers to command. From her purse, she pulled the same folder thinner this time, but I knew what it contained before she even opened it. "Look!" She began sliding the papers toward me. "We can't keep circling this. It's irresponsible. You're living in a house too big for you, and it's only fair to secure things now for the family." The word family twisted in my gut. I sat down slowly, folding my hands in my lap. She tapped the table with her pen. "This is the cleanest way. Transfer the villa, and you can relax. You won't have to worry about anything. We'll take care of it all." Her tone carried no malice, only confidence, the confidence of someone who had already decided the outcome. She leaned forward, her nails clicking against the folder. "Mom, it's time." For a long moment, I said nothing. I looked at her polished face, the smile that had fooled me once the steel behind her eyes. I thought of the legal trust folded neatly in my desk, upstairs, stamped and filed, untouchable. The knowledge steadied me. Finally, I placed my hands on the folder and pushed it gently back across the table. "No," her smile faltered. "You don't even want to read it. I don't need to." A flicker of irritation crossed her face. She tapped the pen harder now, a staccato rhythm against the wood. "You're being stubborn. This isn't about you. It's about what's best for everyone. Don't you care about your son's future? About Emily's?" I inhaled slowly, letting her words hang in the air before answering. "I care more than you know. That's why the villa is already protected." Her eyes narrowed. "Protected?" I nodded. "It's no longer mine to give. It's in trust. Irrevocable. Filed with the county. It belongs to Emily when the time comes." Her face drained of color. For a moment, she looked like she'd been slapped. Then her voice rose sharp. "You went behind our backs." I met her gaze steady. "I did what any mother would do, ensured my granddaughter has a future." The silence that followed was thick buzzing. Her jaw tightened, lips pressed into a thin line. Then she scoffed, leaning back in her chair. "Unbelievable. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." I almost laughed, though there was no humor in it. Everything they had done for me, I thought of the Christmas where I was told to sit in the den of the folder shoved across this same table, of overhearing their plans to remodel my life away. I said nothing. Silence this time was not weakness. It was power. She stood abruptly, gathering her folder, her heels striking the floor like gunfire. "You've made a mistake, Mom. A big one. Don't expect us to pick up the pieces when this blows up in your face." I remained seated, hands resting calmly on the table. "The pieces are mine to hold, and they always will be." She glared at me one last time before storming out the door, slamming so hard the chandelier trembled. I sat still, listening to the echoes fade. When the silence settled again, it was different than before. It wasn't the hollow hush of erasure. It was quiet dignity. The villa stood with me, not against me. Later that evening, I brewed tea and carried it to the den. I sat in my husband's old armchair, the fire crackling low. My hands still trembled slightly, but inside, I felt something unfamiliar, peace. For months, I had been afraid of confrontation, of shattering the fragile balance. But now, I saw it. Clearly, balance had been an illusion. Dignity required standing still, even when someone tried to push you out of your own life. Her nails had tapped the table, waiting for surrender. But surrender never came. He came alone the next evening. I knew by the sound of his knock, soft or hesitant, that it wasn't her. My son stood on the porch in his heavy coat, shoulders slumped, eyes shadowed in the porch light. For a moment, he looked like the boy I once tucked into bed, the boy who used to call me his teammate. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded, and stepped aside. The villa was warm with the smell of simmering soup, but the air between us was cold. He followed me to the kitchen, where we sat at opposite ends of the table. "She told me what you did." He began rubbing his temples. "About the trust." I folded my hands in my lap, steadying myself. "Yes, I did it to protect the villa, to protect Emily." His jaw tightened. "Mom, you didn't even talk to me first. This affects all of us." The words stung, though I had prepared for them. "It's my home," I said gently. "The one your father and I built from nothing. It was ours, and when he passed, it became mine. That doesn't make it all of ours. Not yet." He shook his head, frustrated. "You don't understand. We're trying to build a future. This place, it could help us finally move forward. Why lock it away?" I studied his face, the lines of exhaustion etched deep, the way his hands fidgeted as if torn between loyalty and obligation. "Because you were ready to take it before I was gone?" I said softly. His eyes flicked up to mine, startled. I saw the guilt flicker, then vanish under resolve. "She just wants what's best for us. She's not the enemy here." My chest tightened. "And what am I?" He didn't answer. The silence between us grew heavy, thicker than the soup cooling on the stove. I remembered the sound of his laughter drifting through the vent weeks earlier, the way he hadn't objected when she said I couldn't live here forever. Now, face to face, he couldn't even deny it. "You've changed," I whispered. "You used to see me." He sighed, looking away. "People grow up, Mom. Things change. You can't hold on to everything forever." I thought of the late nights at the diner, the shoebox with my unsent graduate school acceptance letter, the blistered hands fixing pipes when we couldn't afford a plumber. I had let go of everything once for him. Now he was asking me to let go of the last piece of myself. "I'm not holding on for me," I said firmly. "I'm holding on for what matters, for Emily, for the memory of your father, for the life we built together. That villa is more than equity. It's our history." He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head again. "I don't think you see how hard this makes things for me." His words landed like stones in my stomach. For him. Not for me, not for us. For him. I reached across the table, my fingers brushing the wood. "Son, I need you to hear me. I am not your obstacle. I am your mother, and I will not be erased in my own home." His face hardened. The boy was gone. In his place sat a man I barely recognized. "If this is the path you've chosen, then fine. But don't expect her to forgive you. Don't expect me to fix this divide." He stood pulling his coat tighter around him. At the doorway, he paused, glancing back. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw hesitation, the boy flickering through the man. But then he left the door closing softly behind him. I sat there for a long time, the chandelier light trembling faintly above the empty chairs. My chest ached, not with shock this time, but with clarity. He had chosen. He wasn't mine to protect anymore. The soup on the stove had gone cold. I poured it down the drain, watching it swirl away. My reflection shimmered faintly in the water's surface before it disappeared. That night, I didn't pace the villa in restless fear. Instead, I sat in the den firelight, flickering against the walls. The grief was heavy, yes, but it was a grief lined with certainty. I knew exactly where I stood now. Not in the shadows of their plans, not in the silence of their exclusion. I stood in my home protected, unyielding. His silence had been louder than her words. A week passed before I heard the small knock. Not sharp like hers, not weary like his, gentle like a bird against glass. When I opened the door, Emily stood there, in her puffy pink coat, cheeks flushed from the cold, crayons poking out of the pocket. She smiled shyly, holding out a paper bag. "Mom said I should drop off some muffins," she explained, her voice light and unburdened. I bent down to her level, brushing a curl from her forehead. "And did you make these muffins?" she giggled. I helped stir. The bag was warm in my hands. I invited her inside the villa, instantly brighter, with her small footsteps echoing across the marble floor. She kicked off her boots, leaving them by the door like she belonged here without question. In the kitchen, I poured her a glass of milk and set the muffins on a plate. She chatted between bites, her words tumbling over each other. School projects, her best friend's new puppy, a story about how she tripped in gym class and everyone laughed. But she laughed too. Her innocence filled the villa in a way no holiday gathering ever had. After she finished eating, she tugged my hand. "Grandma, can I draw?" I spread out paper on the dining table and watched as she unpacked her crayons. She lay on her stomach, feet swinging in the air, completely absorbed. Her little hands gripped the crayons with intensity, the same way her father once clutched markers when he was small. When she turned the page toward me, my breath caught. It was a drawing of the villa, crooked roof, square windows, a door too big for the house. But in front of it stood two stick figures, her, with wild yellow hair scribbled like sunshine, and me with gray hair drawn long around my face. "That's us," she said proudly. "We live here." Tears pricked my eyes. I nodded, smoothing the page carefully. "Yes, sweetheart, we do." For hours, she filled the paper with colors. Crayons rolled across the table, dropping onto the marble floor with soft clicks. Red hearts, purple flowers, a sun shining so large it covered the sky. I kept every sheet she handed me, stacking them neatly like treasures. At one point, she paused, tilting her head. "Why don't you come over to our house more?" The question pierced me. I forced a smile, brushing her cheek. "Sometimes grown-ups forget to make time, but I'm always here for you." She studied me for a moment, her eyes wide with the honesty only children carry. Then she crawled into my lap, curling against me. The warmth of her small body, the steady rhythm of her breath, reminded me why I had done everything, the sacrifices, the trust, the refusal to yield. It wasn't just about preserving a house. It was about making sure she always had a place where love was unquestioned. When the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting golden light across the dining table, Emily gathered her papers. I slipped them into a folder, promising to keep them safe. She hugged me tight at the door, her small arms fierce around my neck. "Bye, Grandma. I'll come back soon," she said. After she left, the villa felt different. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It hummed with the echoes of her laughter, the scratch of crayons across paper, the sound of her voice claiming, "We live here." I pinned one of her drawings to the refrigerator. For years, my face had been missing from photos and pictures. Now here it was, scribbled in bright crayon, undeniable. That night, I made myself tea and sat at the dining table surrounded by her artwork. The walls seemed to lean closer, listening alive again. I whispered into the quiet, "This is family." The villa no longer felt like a cage or a battlefield. It felt like a home again, reborn not through entitlement or signatures, but through love, drawn in crooked lines by a child who still saw me. Her crayons on the marble floor were the only contract I needed. Winter softened into spring before I realized how much had shifted inside me. The villa, once heavy with betrayal, now carried a gentler weight. Each morning, I opened the curtains and let the light spill across the rooms. Dust motes shimmered in the air, like quiet reminders that time still moved forward, whether I felt ready or not. I began tending the garden again. At first, only in small bursts, pulling weeds with stiff knees, trimming dead branches with unsteady hands. But slowly, color returned. Daffodils pushed through the soil, tulips unfurled in careful layers. Their resilience mirrored my own. The villa wasn't a cage anymore. It was a sanctuary. I thought often about my son. Some nights I sat by the fire and let memories of him as a boy drift through me like smoke, his laughter chasing down hallways, his small hand clutching mine on the walk to kindergarten. The ache of his distance was sharp, but no longer paralyzing. I couldn't change his choices. I could only live with mine. The legal trust rested in my desk drawer, stamped and final. Sometimes I took it out, running my fingers across the embossed seal. Its cold certainty no longer frightened me. It comforted me. My legacy wasn't a question anymore. It was an answer I had already given. Not to them, not even to myself, but to Emily. On weekends, she still visited. She'd run through the villa barefoot, scattering crayons across the floor, her drawings multiplying on the refrigerator door. In every picture there, we were her and me side by side in front of the crooked roof villa with a sun that never stopped shining. Once, she pointed to one of her drawings and asked Grandma, "Why do I always draw you here?" I smiled, brushing her hair back. "Because this is where you'll always find me." Her laughter rang through the hallways, filling the spaces that had once echoed with silence. And in those moments, I understood something I hadn't before. Legacy isn't about what we leave behind. It's about what we nurture while we're still here. I stopped waiting for apologies. I stopped hoping for reconciliation that would never come. Instead, I poured my energy into the small rituals that stitched me back together, brewing tea in the mornings, baking my old chocolate cake just for myself, planting marigolds along the walkway so the villa bloomed with color when anyone passed by. Neighbors began stopping again, commenting on the garden, sharing coffee over the porch railing. Slowly, I rebuilt a circle of warmth that had nothing to do with bloodlines or signatures. Family, I realized, could be chosen. And sometimes it was found in the people who stayed when others walked away. One evening, I sat at the dining table with Emily, helping her with homework. She chewed on her pencil, frustration furrowing her brow. "I don't get it," she groaned, pushing the math sheet toward me. I laughed softly. "That's okay. We'll figure it out together." Her eyes lit up, and in that moment, I felt the villa breathe with us. It wasn't just walls and ceilings. It was a vessel of memory, a container of belonging. It held the past, yes, but also the possibility of a future I could shape with love, not control. Later that night, after she'd gone home, I walked through the villa alone. The chandelier glowed warmly, not as a reminder of exclusion, but as a witness to survival. I touched the wallpaper in the upstairs corridor, the faint scent of my husband's cologne still lingering after all these years. For the first time, it didn't make me ache. It made me smile. I whispered into the quiet, I kept my promise. The villa no longer echoed with betrayal. It sang with resilience, and in that stillness I found peace, not the kind that erases grief, but the kind that holds it gently, like a scar that no longer bleeds. The walls no longer echoed, this time they sang. The seasons turned again, as they always do. By summer, the villa's garden had burst alive, roses climbing the trellis, marigolds blazing gold against the stone path, lavender filling the air with a softness that seemed to linger long after dusk. I spent most evenings on the porch, rocking gently in the wooden chair, my husband once built, the boards creaking beneath me like an old song. Life had slowed, but it had not diminished. In fact, it felt fuller, as if the absence of noise left space for something truer to settle in. I no longer strained for phone calls that didn't come or invitations that never arrived. Instead, I listened to the crickets, watched the fireflies blink in the twilight, and allowed the villa to breathe around me. Sometimes, loneliness brushed against me like a shadow, reminding me of what had been lost. My son's laughter, his hand once reaching for mine, those memories still lived in these walls. But grief no longer swallowed me whole. It sat beside me quieter now, like an old companion that had learned when to leave me in peace. Emily's visits remained my anchor. She would tumble through the door with crayons spilling from her backpack, eager to show me her newest creations. Her drawings had grown more detailed windows, with curtains trees swaying beside the crooked villa. And always without fail, she drew me there, smiling beside her. One afternoon, she asked Grandma, "Will this always be your house?" I knelt beside her, brushing hair from her forehead. "It will always be ours," I told her. Her grin stretched wide, and in that moment, I knew she understood more than I thought she could. When she left that day, I pinned her latest drawing on the refrigerator beside the others. A patchwork gallery of love proof that my place had not been erased. As summer slipped toward autumn, I began writing more letters. I never sent journal entries I tucked between books, recipes annotated with notes of memory. It wasn't for anyone else. It was for me to claim my story before anyone else tried to rewrite it. I often found myself sitting in the den at night, the fire crackling low, the trust papers tucked away in the desk upstairs. I didn't need to check them anymore. Knowing they existed was enough. They weren't just legal protection. They were a testament to the fact that I had chosen myself finally, after years of silence. The villa had become still, yes, but it was a different kind of stillness than before. Not the hush of exclusion or the ache of waiting for footsteps that never came. This was the stillness of ownership, of clarity, of peace, that didn't need to be loud to be real. One evening, as the first autumn leaves scattered across the porch, I stood at the window and watched them fall. The trees whispered in the fading light, their branches swaying gently. I thought of my husband, then his laughter echoing faintly in memory, his promise tucked into every corner of this house. "Don't let them erase you." "I didn't," I whispered back. I stepped outside into the cool air, the scent of earth and leaves rising around me. The villa glowed behind me, its windows lit strong and steady. It no longer felt like a fortress I had to defend. It felt like a companion, a witness to all I had endured and reclaimed. I knew there would be no neat resolution with my son, no sudden apology from her. That chapter was closed, but I didn't need their validation anymore. My peace had been rebuilt brick by brick, in quiet acts of resistance, in love, scribbled with crayons, in the decision to stand when they tried to push me out. The night deepened, stars pricking the sky one by one. I sat on the porch, hands folded in my lap, breathing in the stillness. Some treasures had been recovered. Others, more valuable, still had been discovered for the first time. It wasn't the ending I'd expected. It was better, harder, clearer, more honest. It was mine. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.